Hello everyone and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and this one is Arise, Cry Out in the Night, the Children of the House of God. And this one is dedicated to the Refuah Shlema of Avraham Yehoshua ben Esther Malka. Don't worry about it, it's all good. All right, let's get into it. So first of all, a quick reminder of what we're doing right here. What is this all about? We forget, as do I, which is why this is happening. So a quick reminder why we're here and what these specific classes are about. Everything has to do with our levels of consciousness, meaning the moment we hear something, see something, or something, let's say, clicks, from that point on, it can be already part of our day-to-day. Somehow it's stored in there and it can influence, even in the tiniest way. We have a better idea of why we are doing the things we are doing, and the significance of our actions will manifest accordingly. Everything that we have been doing is to teach you here that God has a plan, and you are part of it simply because you exist. If you are here, that means you're part of God's plan. End of story. And if you don't do what you are created to do, then God will use you in another way. But again, God just, like we said, He doesn't make mistakes. What you do with what you get is entirely on you. But the bottom line is this. This is how coincidences don't just exist. Now, from the largest life-changing events to the smallest and seemingly insignificant ones that happen throughout our day, all are perfectly designed to do one thing, and that is to rectify this world, as we have been learning. Once you understand that you have been created to rectify this world, that everything that is here is created for that purpose, you should understand that you actually do have a purpose and a meaning. So, every topic that we have been learning here in these classes since Shavuot is for the sake of elevating our consciousness towards this goal. You'll see I stopped teaching the Parasha, and Arena teaches the Parasha now, but I stopped doing it because this stuff is important and it's relevant to this time. It's not just another Torah teaching, okay? Like we said, it ain't about the clicks and it ain't about the views. It's about who this gets to, and the right people, it will get to them, and that's why I'm not worried. We do our due diligence. We do our hishtadlut, as we have been learning. So again, I'm not at liberty to share everything with you, okay? But what I do share, it matters. And I can see this because the sparks are actually being called. You are the sleeper cells of God. And one by one you are waking up with such great mercy. You are receiving this understanding from the outside that most Jews inside have not received, but you guys are. Our world currently is asleep, in a comatose state even, and I must say, unfortunately, this is by choice. Most people are not even aware of the fact that they're asleep, just like, oh, you're a slave. No, I'm not. Aha, right there. If you don't even know that you are a slave, that's terrible, and that's how the world wants to keep it right now. But we're breaking that, one neshama at a time. The truth is that the face of a person who willfully plucked out their eyes is a waste of everyone's time, right? So if you choose, and I'm not going to deal with this because it's too much for me to handle right now. I don't want to be you. And time is a luxury that we can no longer afford to squander. Not that we ever could, but again, there isn't much left now. So again, I say, it's not my responsibility to open anyone's eyes. In fact, I cannot do that. No one can, right? God is the only one that saves, despite what you have been told. That is entirely on God's shoulders, the creator of the heavens and the earth and of all things. That's His job, it's His plan. All I can do is hold up the sign or point to Him, and do what He tells me to do. Whoever needs to come, they will come. That's all I can do. Okay. And by the way, this is what Anarina and I prayed for the 50 days over there that we took the hiatus. Every single day we working up those madrigot. So the right people come in, and the wrong people are being kept out. And we actually specifically prayed for it. Bring us the nitzotzot, and those that don't need to be here, let them not come in, because, one bad seed can infect all those beautiful trees that are on their way to blossom. So again, it's so, so important to have the right synergy and the right people. Again, this is not for everybody. I'm well aware. And I don't hate anybody. I love everybody because we're all one and the same. You understand? Even if we completely fundamentally disagree, you and I are still connected whether we like it or not. But this is what I have to do. This is what we have to do. And this is what you have to do right now. So here we are, and that's what we need to focus on. Don't worry about that anymore, because there's nothing that you can do. You can only do this. That's all we can do. Now, the moment I realized that life wasn't about me personally is when I began to get very protective over others, meaning over you guys, because we need to identify who is doing the work to help them, because if we had any idea how much you and me, excuse me, you are I and I am you, if that makes any sense, that we would start chasing people down, begging them to let us do something for them, don't you see? But again, that's not how this thing works. Nevertheless, see Avraham Avinu. God created the world for him, but he didn't chase people down. If people came into his domain, then he did. But he sat there, and God sent him whoever needed to come. And then when they came, he said, there's something I need to tell you. There's something you need to hear. He took it as a sign because they came to his domain. What is his domain? As far as he could see. That's why he dwelt in non-populated areas. So whoever should come by, that's his guy. Anyway, Genesis 2:4, Behibaram be'avram, that's why God created the world. But also, what do we learn? God created the world for you, for me. Bishvili nivra ha'olam. Don't ever forget that. So I'm not going to go on with this. I know but anyway, okay. I just want to remind everyone why we are here. Just a quick refresher of how important it is. So here's another level of consciousness we need to add to our mental and spiritual psyche. This one has everything to do with successfully settling the land and building Jerusalem. In Talmud Yerushalmi, Masechet Chagiga, it says, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, that's the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, it was the time of the Talmud, so he was there as well. If you have seen cities or towns uprooted from their place in the land of Israel, know that it is because you have neglected the wages of Torah scholars and Torah teachers, as written in Jeremiah 9:11 and 12. Who is the man so wise that he can understand this? And who is he to whom the mouth of the Lord has spoken that he may declare it? Why is the land ruined and withered like a wilderness, without anyone passing through? And the Lord said, it is because they have forsaken my law, which I set before them, and have not hearkened to my voice, nor walked by it. Velo halchu ba, halchu, halicha. Listen to what he's saying. Torah and halacha. Very strong remazim, very strong hints over here. Biblical foreshadowing, that's the remez, right? Midrash Tehillim on Psalms 127 says, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who's Rabbi Yehuda the prince? He was not a prince, but he was the chief guy, right? He's the one that actually wrote down the Mishnah. He took the oral law, that which should never be written down because it is fluid, but he said if we don't write this down, he saw in Ruach HaKodesh that we're about to go into a very, very long exile, and if we don't have something substantial, we will lose our way. And then all the oral law will be nothing but a faint memory of something that might have been something. Now at least we have something that we can learn from. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi sent Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Ami to all the cities across the land of Israel to make a tikkun for the cities, to do a rectification. How so? By erecting for them teachers of Torah and Mishnah. Here we go. It's exactly what God said why the land was desolate and destroyed. Mishnah, that's specifically for the laws, right? They went into one place, and there was not a single teacher of Torah and Mishnah. He said to the people, bring me the watchman of this city. And so they did. Now, usually if there is a group of rabbis, because there were 3 rabbis, and if he says that he said, it's usually, and instead of they, it's usually the first name on the list, meaning the most senior rabbi. In this case, it was Rabbi Chia. Okay? So he said to the people, bring me the watchman of this city. Some came to mind right now. When the 3 angels came to Abraham, Abraham addressed one of them and only one was speaking to him. You see that? And that was the chief of the 3, which was Michael, Michael, Gavriel, and Raphael. That was the hierarchy. So Michael was the one that spoke to him directly. Okay, so he said to the people, bring me the watchman of this city, and so they did. These are the watchmen, he asked, bewildered. And when it says he's speaking for them. They were all bewildered. No. These are the destroyers of the city, they said. Because who are the real watchmen of the city? The teachers of Torah and Mishnah, i.e. halacha. As written in Psalms 127:1, if the Lord will not guard the city, its watchers keep his vigil in vain. How does the Lord get involved in the city? Through Torah and Mishnah. Through it being taught. Going back to the reason we started this topic of teaching, the end from the beginning, Acharit Kereshit. What was the first video called right after Shavuot? What started this whole thing? The one where we came out swinging. It was called Watchmen, right? Watch it. Understand what we are doing here as a refresher. Now let's take a look and see yet another hierarchy in Torah study and the true guardians of the city or a city, the source and power of its watchmen. Masechet Shabbat 119b. Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, what is the meaning of that which is written? Do not touch my anointed ones and do my prophets no harm. Okay? 1 Chronicles 16:22. Right now, obviously in 70 faces of Torah, one of them means my anointed ones, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. But what is it specifically speaking to in this regard over here? Do not touch my anointed ones. These are the school children who are as precious and important as kings and priests. And do not harm my prophets. These are the Torah scholars. So the prophets are the scholars back in the day. The prophets were the ones that actually taught the Torah. But the children, the small children, these are the anointed ones because they got a job to do. Reish Lakish said, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nesia Hanasi, it's in Aramaic, the world only exists because of the breath, i.e. reciting Torah of school children. School children means like Tinokot shel Beit Rabban. This is Tinokot is a baby, Beit Rabban as in the house of the master, God's house, right? Rav Papa said to Abaye, my Torah study and yours, what is its status? Why is the Torah study of adults worth less than the study of children? He said to him, the breath of adults, which is tainted by sin, makes sense, right? Is not similar to the breath of children, which is not tainted by sin. And Rish Lakish said, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nesia, one may not interrupt school children from studying Torah, even in order to build the temple. We pray all the time for building the temple. And yet, you know what it's like when small children study Torah, when they pray? It's angels directly singing and on our behalf. There is nothing more powerful. That's it. Ow. Nothing more powerful. And Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yehuda Nesia, I have received from my ancestors. And some say that he said to him, I have received from your ancestors as follows. Any city in which there are no school children studying Torah, they destroy it. Ravina said, they leave it desolate. And so we have learned that the settling of the land of Israel actually stands and is sustained, meaning corrected, metukan, upon the teaching Torah and halacha to the children, as in the small children of Israel. Okay, not the children of Israel, but the small children of the children of Israel. And anyone who believes that they can sustain the land without them is wrong, so they say, and they are correct. This is all based on the prophets. You see what God said in Jeremiah. And we'll also see this in Deuteronomy as well, all the warnings that have been given, and then they didn't pay attention to that, and then exactly what God said would happen, happened. In Masechet Baba Batra 21a, it says, Rav Yehuda says, that Rav says, truly, that man is remembered for the good, and his name is Yehoshua ben Gamla. Who is Yehoshua ben Gamla? If not for him, the Torah would have been forgotten from the Jewish people. Okay, let's learn about this guy. Initially, whoever had a father would have his father teach him Torah, and whoever did not have a father would not learn Torah at all. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean whoever did not have a father, like a fatherless child, but we're talking about someone who does not know how to teach Torah. In other words, who did not have a father who could teach them Torah. Okay? The Gemara explains what verse did they interpret homiletically that allowed them to conduct themselves in this manner. They interpreted the verse that states, and you shall teach them otam, your sons, Deuteronomy 11:19, to mean, and you yourselves, atem, shall teach, i.e., you fathers shall teach your sons. This is a responsibility of every father to make sure that his son learns Torah. If he himself cannot do it, a father is required to go get a rabbi and said, here's your Torah teacher. You will learn from this man. And that's how it is. But anyway, it's all the father's responsibility. So when the sages saw that not everyone was capable of teaching their children and Torah study was declining, they instituted an ordinance that teachers of children should be established in Jerusalem. Right? Like, we understand not everyone in Israel is a Torah scholar. That's why there are Torah scholars, and everyone else has got a day job. Some people know less. It's okay, but obviously there's still a basic knowledge of Torah. Nevertheless, not everyone has time to sit down with their child and teach them Torah all day long, because they do have to go work. Right? The Gemara explains what verse did they interpret homiletically that enabled them to do this? They interpreted the verse. For Torah emerges from Tzion. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, Isaiah 2:3. That's why I've spoken to some of you, and you learn from teachers all over the world. That's all great and good. But hey, God said, mitzion tetzeh Torah, from Zion, which is from Jerusalem. By the way, just remember that, okay? Where do you get your Torah from? The Talmud goes on. But still, whoever had a father, his father ascended with him to Jerusalem and had him taught by whoever did not have a father. He did not ascend and learn. So in other words, if my father's out working right now and he can't ascend with me to Jerusalem, so what, I'm not going to learn Torah? No. Therefore, the sages instituted an ordinance that teachers of children should be established in one city in each and every region. So in other words, not only in Jerusalem. What if you live up in Sfat? I mean, Sfat is a great place, obviously. It's super spiritual. It's one of the holy cities in Israel. But let's say you live, 2-3 hours away from Jerusalem. 2-3 hours. If you would walk, maybe 2-3 days, right? A guy who's working to support his family cannot take off 2-3 days to go with their son to Jerusalem. So what do? Okay, we're going to establish teachers everywhere, because again, there's still holiness within the land of Israel. But it comes out, it originates from Mitzion Tetzeh Torah, spreads out to the rest of the land. But Zion is that's the point. Therefore, the sages instituted the teachers in every city. Okay, and they bought the students in the age of 16 and 17 to learn with them. Now, but as the students were old and had not yet any formal education, a student whose teacher grew angry with him would rebel against him and leave. It was impossible to hold the youths there against their will. So look, teenagers back then are just like teenagers. I can't say that. But basically, teenagers are teenagers. It's hard to hold that. And that's why, here he's talking teenagers, but when is a father supposed to start teaching their kid? The moment their kid has any kind of understanding. Who are you? What does it mean to be a Jew? What does it mean to live in Israel? What is the Torah? Tell them the stories about the patriarchs. You start educating them. Okay, so I was fortunate enough. Again, we moved from the States to Israel at a young age. Nevertheless, I remember going to Young Israel in Staten Island. And they had everything was Torah oriented. It was like proud Jews, right? And then you come here to Israel, and it's everywhere. It's not just one thing. It's all around you. So again, I was fortunate to learn that, and then I grew up in a modern Orthodox school. So already by second grade, I'm learning how to read Rashi. Again, blessed, really, really blessed. I'm not gloating. I wish I would have appreciated it back then, and I squandered it for many years, and now I'm actually going back to say, Baruch Hashem. We don't even know how blessed we are. So. And that's why this is happening right now, because you understand. If I could only, I think so many times, I'm babbling, I'm sorry. I think so many times, what would happen if I could go back 30, 40 years and I could talk to myself back then? What kind of conversations would I have? I'd have to sit myself down and be like, listen, man, there's a lot of things and nothing means anything except for this. Try explaining that to a kid, and then obviously to a teenager. But once you explain it to a child first and they grow to become a teenager, that's already a different story. The Ramchal became a rabbi. He got his smicha when he was 20 years old because he started as a kid. So did most of the others. Anyway, Rabbi Akiva started when he was 40, and it didn't matter because God gave him that gift. Nevertheless, he invested. He was sitting in class with school children, 6 years old, because he couldn't even read or write. The Rabbi Akiva. That takes commitment right there. You understand? We are humbled however we are, but in the end, if we're on the right track, God opens it all up for us based on our effort, and we will see this. Sorry about the thing. Let's get back. Still important though. Okay, so it was impossible to get a hold of the youths over there if they didn't grow up like that. This state of affairs continued until Yehoshua ben Gamla came and instituted an ordinance that teachers of children should be established in each and every province and in each and every town. And they would bring the children in at the age of what? 6 and 7, not when they're teenagers. Start them off when they're young, when they can already start to comprehend. Obviously, the basics from home, 6, 7, we go to first grade when we're 6 years old, right? Okay. There you go. Anyway, so initially the teachers of the children had to very specifically be in Jerusalem, because it clearly states, "From out of Zion shall the Torah come forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Okay, so obviously you want to be close to where this stuff originates from. And this is what keeps the world in existence, as it is the epicenter of the world. This is the heart of Zion, and when God's word is being taught and spoken from right here, then, we got another day. It's a good thing. This is why they wanted to focus it on here, but they also understood that it's not always possible. Okay, we still got to learn Torah, though. In Masechet Yoma 53b, it says, the sages say that from Zion the word was created. As said in Psalms 50, verse 1, El Elohim Adonai, Mizmor L'Asaf, right? Here's how terribly it translates in English, a song of Asaph, God, God the Lord. But in Hebrew it says El, which is God, and then it says Elokim, which is Elokim, and then it says Yud Kei Vav Kei. So you have three variations of the name of God, right? Diber vayikra eretz mimizrach shemesh ad mevo, spoke and called to the earth from the rising of the sun until its setting. And where does God speak from? Psalms 50 verse 2. From Zion, the finery of beauty, God appeared. El Elokim and Yud Kei Vav Kei. From Zion, that's it. So they know this. For Zion holds all the beauty in the world. Actually, it says very specifically, the 9/10 of all the beauty of the world. 9/10 God put here in Jerusalem. So obviously the Jerusalem that we see today is not the Jerusalem not the supernal Jerusalem. Nevertheless, they are connected. We are called to make that. Think of it as the positive Tower of Babel, okay? Only without bricks, spiritual bricks. We have something to build up for that conduit. Not in order to, like morons, fight God in heaven, but rather to accept the kingdom coming down here. That type of situation. Everything is metaphorically speaking, of course. We don't... Okay, you get it. Anyway, you guys, sorry. And from Jerusalem draws the power to correct every city and state. In Eicha Rabbah, chapter 133, from Lamentations 1:6, and gone is from the daughter of Zion all her splendor. Kol hadara. Wow. Who is her splendor? These are the small children. Rabbi Yehuda said, come and see how fond the Holy One, blessed be He, is of these tinokot, of these babies. When the Sanhedrin were exiled, the Shekhinah did not go with them. When the Mishmarot, the shifts, right? But those who learn Torah to maintain the world, when they were exiled, the Shekhinah did not go with them. But since the small children were exiled, the Shekhinah left with them davka. You understand the ma'ala, the degree of importance and the power of children learning Torah, the Sanhedrin? These guys are the ones that wrote the Talmud. They wrote the Mishnah. These are the ones that have been given the powers of the universe. These are the ones that corresponded with God. And yet, the Shekhinah left with the children and not with them. As written in Lamentations 1:5, her adversaries have become the head, her enemies are at ease, for the Lord has afflicted her because of the multitude of her sins. Her young children went into captivity before the enemy. Followed immediately by, and gone is from the daughter of Zion all her splendor. Now here's a little conversation from Brachot 8b regarding the high degree of the Torah of infants. I say infants, but again, small children. The sages of Athens then asked another question. When salt is spoiling, with what does one salt it to preserve it? Rabbi Yehoshua said to them, with the placenta of a mule. They said to him, but is there a placenta of a mule? Rabbi Yehoshua said to them, and does salt spoil? You gotta always love it. Answering like a stupid question with another question. Okay, the answer being no. Mules don't have placentas because they can't procreate. A mule cannot have a placenta just as salt does not spoil. Or let's say, in today's vernacular, Rabbi Yehoshua would have answered the question with the question of like, well, if the salt goes down in the saltiness, how's it going to get its saltiness back? Through an honest politician. But do honest politicians exist? All those who are alive? No. Anyway, the Gra comments on this and says, the Holy One, blessed be He, entered into a covenant with Israel, as written in Numbers 18:19. It is like an eternal covenant of salt before the Lord for you and your descendants with you. Why? What is this salt? Why is this so important? Why is this likened to the covenant of salt? Because salt cannot lose its saltiness. And so too this covenant cannot lose ever its validity. Furthermore, this cannot happen with the salt which removes the stench from the offerings, as it is written in Sanhedrin 91b, through salt the world stands. I've mentioned this before. I'm going to tell you something else really cool that where did I hear this? I read it either in the Zohar or Rabbeinu Bachye. So it's something beautiful about the salt, the importance of the salt, and why we have to have salt in every offering, a covenant of salt on our table. Why salt? Where does salt actually come from? It doesn't come from the Dead Sea. There's salt in the Dead Sea, but it comes from the ocean. That's where the salt comes from, right? Why is the ocean salty? Because when God separated the firmaments, remember there's one, God created the firmament, and then He separated the waters from the water. And the waters that went up went with God, and the waters that stayed below, well, we are polluting that one today. And so the waters that stayed below began to weep. Salty tears, if you will, because of the separation from God. I don't want to be apart from you. All of creation is more aware of God than we are. So water is holy. Water cleanses. You could even go into the ocean, and that's a mikveh, purify anything that comes from purifying open bodies of water. You can do a mikveh in there. So the ocean was crying to God, and God said, "I hear you, my creation, and because of this, don't worry. Every single covenant that I have with Israel, every single korban that draws them near to me, every time they eat on their table, which is likened to a mizbeach, just like Mizbeach in the temple with the salt, Mizbeach at home with the salt. We had a class on this. You will be there, and hence the salt, and it is the covenant of salt. And so this draws us closer to God every time. And I just thought that's something. Now, next time you salt whatever you do, understand where that comes from. And it always put a beautiful smile on my face. That came out wrong. It's a beautiful thing that put a smile on my face. I'm just going to continue now. The sages of Athens once again asked, but now since your salt covenant has been broken by you, by what or whose strength do you believe your covenant will remain? As written in Psalms 119, 126, a time to do for the Lord, they have made void your Torah. And oh yeah, okay, they were no dummies, these guys. They knew their opposition. These sages of Athens, they knew who they were speaking to. You got to learn, if you're going to get into a debate or something, you got to know the opposition. So they did it. Does it not say in Psalms, as they said in their robes and whatnot? And he answered, saying, Deuteronomy 28:57, and the infants who emerge from between her legs, right? Targum Yonatan says, the small children. Rashi quotes from Masechet Shabbat 119b, which says, the world cannot stand but for the words from the children of the house of God, and from Tikkunei Zohar number 6, page 17a, as written in Deuteronomy 22:6, where it says, if the mother is sitting upon the fledglings and upon the eggs, meaning the Shekhinah upon the babies, right? These are the babies, because it is from them that the Shekhinah still remains with Israel, as she dwells within them, and through them the world stands, as written in Jeremiah 33:25. So said the Lord, if not my covenant with the day and night. And they continue to ask him, after the gathering of Israel, Knesset Israel is barren in exile, as a wife who has been sent away, how then do you birth little ones for God, for your covenant is broken? Said every replacement theologian ever. To which he responded to them, you can never break the covenant of salt. That's why God called it a covenant of salt. For I am still his wife, and that is why God said in Isaiah 50 verse 1, so says the Lord, where is your mother's bill of divorce that I sent her away? It don't exist. Or who is it of my creditors to whom I sold you? I did not. Behold, for your iniquities you were sold, and for your transgression your mother was sent away. She left with you. The covenant can never be broken, even if Israel sins, even if Israel does not do what God said. The Shekhinah belongs to God, and he never sent her away, but she chose to leave with her sons, who angered their father. This is an answer if anyone asks this question. Song of Songs 1:8. If you do not know, O fairest of women, go your way in the footsteps of the flocks, and pasture your kids besides the shepherd's dwelling. Pasture your kids. What is that? The children of the house of God. And these children are raised on two things, Torah and halacha. This is how they are raised. The children, if anyone raises their children like that, they are children of the house of God. These are the parameters. Torah is the info, and halacha is how to use this info. But wait, this is only the beginning here. Of course, the more advanced you get, the higher the learning. In Bereshit Rabbah, chapter 42:2, it says, so did the evil Achaz say, Ahaz, not Ahab, Achaz. If there are no goats, there will be no rams. If there is no flock, there will be no shepherd. And where will the world be? And again, he was evil, so we'll see. So did he say, if there are no masters, there will be no students. Rabban is also a master, right? You're freaking out. Master of the universe. Also, again, if you're in, martial arts, your teacher is the master. In other words, he's not all powerful. He's master of this thing. So, anyway, if there are no masters, there will be no students. We get that. If there are no students, there will be no sages, because the students at that age, they grow up to be sages. If there is no Torah, there will be no synagogues and study halls. What did Achaz do? He passed all the synagogues and study halls, and he sealed them shut. No more learning Torah or halacha. cutting off the lifeline over there. Hence evil. And this is the meaning of that which the verse states in Isaiah 8:16, bind up the message, seal the instruction with my disciples. And when they saw that the things were like this, they all started to cry out, woe, that the world is being destroyed. Are you kidding me? You're not going to let us learn Torah? When study of Torah was negated, that was in the days of Achaz. What else is coming to my mind right now? What happened a year and a half ago? How long? When all these shenanigans started, they were closing the study halls and the synagogues here. Oh yeah, they actually did that. Sure, you can go out and you can protest and do whatever you want. Thousands of people gathered together, one on top of the other. No face diapers. Just, go ahead, because it's a waste of time. So sure, let them have their thing. But for the study of Torah, in the land of Israel, the government set a decree to stop it, and a lot of the rabbis, no, these people actually do have a smicha. When I say rabbis, anyone who gives this kind of decree, he's not a rabbi in my book, and on equal footing with Achaz according to God's book. Anyone who takes away the study of Torah from anyone and says, now the only way you want to go back and studying in the Beit Midrash, you got to get the magic cure. Yeah, no rabbi of mine. Sorry, it's okay. Accounts will be settled. It's all good, but just so you see what's going on here, because they understand the power of study of Torah, especially in Israel. Cut that out, what happens? Darkness falls. Country is divided. Jews are angry at Jews because of not anything else except, who's buying it, who's drinking the Kool-Aid, and who's not. That's one way to try and snuff out the holiness. And then we have in Rabbah 65:20, Abba Bar Kahana said, there were no philosophers in the world like Bilam ben Beor and Onimus of Gadara. Okay, who is this guy? I had to look him up because this is what it says. He was the 2nd century pagan philosopher and the Bilam of that time. So less deceiving people with magic, more so with his words. These are the modern day witchcraft people, the people who have public stages, speak garbage, and our children become idiots. Those are the sorcerers of today. Okay, they usually come with titles of heads of studios or whatnot. Propaganda machine. So, like we said, less deceiving people with magic, more so with words or whatever else they're putting down. So essentially, what's the difference, right? No difference. Okay, so this is why Rabbi Abba compared the two, because he was at his time, Bilam the other. He says all the stargazers or the star worshippers, pagans, and the it crowd would gather in their presence, and they would ask him or them, tell us, can we join this nation? Can we join Israel, right? He told them, go back to their synagogues and their houses of study. If you hear the sounds of children, then you cannot join them. That's our real protection. You see, the synagogues is where you read the Torah, and the houses of study is where you learn the Mishnah and the Talmud, right? And in the Targum it says regarding this, that so long as Israel teaches their children to go to synagogue and the houses of study, by that merit God will sustain you in the exile until he sends King Mashiach. This is how there are still Jewish communities in the exile today, because there are yeshivot all over the world. I wish there weren't, but again, God's doing this. I'm just saying, you guys are crazy for not coming here, but it's okay. He wakes up whoever he needs to wake up when they need to wake up. Proverbs 1:20. Wisdom's shout in the street. In the squares she gives forth her voice. Chochmot bachutz tarona, ba'ochovot titen kola. Now the Gra comments on this. To all those who stand on the outside, all God shows them is the pshat, the simple text, as we've learned, right? You can read Hebrew, good for you. And this is the Rina of the Torah. It says Rona, Rina, it's the same thing. Rina means a song of praise after much longing. In other words, you're waiting, you're praying. Finally, we're praying right now for Mashiach. Mashiach comes, we sing with like a relief. Baruch Hashem, thank God, this is what we've been waiting for thousands of years. That song is called a Rina, okay? Like Anna Rina's name, her name is Anna Rina. Anna with an ayin, which means Anna is God answered, he answered. Rina, God answered my song or praise after much longing. It's a cool name. So that's her name. As our sages said in Brachot 6a, in the place where there is Rina, there is tefillah, praying. Because that is where they teach the children how to sing praises to God, in the house of prayer. Furthermore, the Rina of the Torah is also the study of Mishnah, as said in Targum Echa for Lamentations 2:19. Arise, cry out in the night, at the beginning of the watches, right? This is our verse. This call goes out to the ingathering of Israel, to the Knesset Israel, also known as the Shekhinah, who dwells with them, who is in exile, and toil in Mishnah at night. What is at night? Night is the exile. So we know that because of the exile, the Mishnah, aka the oral law, had to be written down like we said before. Otherwise, there would be nothing left because all the wisdom of the sages has been taken away because they literally hunted them down, tortured and killed them. That's why this wisdom had to be written down. But now we also know that the way to keep this alive is through the education of the children. This is for the song of longing, not for what was, but for what will be. Who here remembers the glory of the first temple? Anybody? No, right? We got nothing to go on. All we can do is study right now and begin to see it in our mind's eye, the understanding of how things truly need to be. And it's even better than what was in its best first temple period. So this is what we're talking about. This is that longing for what will be. And this is the covenant of salt that is eternal. And this is what Jeremiah is urging us to do now while we are still in the exile. Even though I'm in Israel right now, we're still in exile. Mashiach ain't here. We're still in exile. Jerusalem is not Jerusalem as it was. We're still in exile. Arise. This is what we got to do. And cry out in the night. Cry out in exile. So long as we are in exile, arise and cry out. Do it. Now, why is it so important to emphasize the synagogues and the houses of study? As we just learned, in the synagogues you read the Torah. And it represents the Tanakh, as we also have the Haftarot and the Megillot, and we read the Tanakh there. While in the Beit Midrash, the houses of study, you have a breakdown of the halachot from the Torah itself, which begins with the Mishnah and carries out into the Talmud. This is the oral law. This is the elementary school and then high school of Torah study. Many like to jump to the master's, or PhD level through Kabbalah. Great that you could read it because it's printed in English, but just as it works through secular studies, okay, so too is the same concept in Torah. Which one you think came first anyway? Your understanding of the more advanced learning is entirely dependent upon your focused efforts on the Torah and oral Torah, meaning the Torah and Halacha. That's what everything is based on. This whole thing of God gave me understanding and now I can learn and teach Kabbalah. Is this working? Now I can learn and teach because God opened the Holy Spirit and now I know things. It doesn't fly here. You know why it doesn't fly here? Do you think any of our sages, any of them, just received an understanding without effort? Without effort? They all dedicated their lives to the study of Torah. And no one is denying their God-given talents. But they are just that, God-given, like we discussed. You can achieve the same thing without any talent as a person with talent can achieve, because it all depends about how much you put in. But what these men did with what God gave them is the reason that they were able to reach these incredible heights. So, what does this have to do with the children? this is where it all begins. You see, the study of Torah and all that comes with it is not like the study of anything else in the world. It's not the topic of anything else, nothing. Why? When people learn to study things, they study because they either want the knowledge and or the know-how to do it. I'm going to study, pottery so I can make pots, okay? I'm going to study quantum physics because I want to understand what the hell's going on in the world right now, right? Okay, no problem. But in Judaism, and again, forgive the ism, I'm not a fan of this, but this is what needs to be worked in today. But in Judaism, in the Word of God, in Torah, what is Judaism? I know it's a man-made establishment. Nevertheless, it's the best thing that we got today, still. What we learn does not end by what we do, but rather by who we are. Like I do Jewish practices. No, this is who we are. I'm learning this in order to do because this is who I am. I am a Jew, and I'm going to learn what God said to me. That's why we do these things. So let's take a look. Pirkei Avot 1:17, it says, study is not the most important thing, but actions. Why would we start studying if we're not drawn to it to begin with, right? But actions are even more important than studying. We all have to start with some form of study, of course. And again, think children. And what do we call all of this info that we learn? You get all the info. You call it wisdom, chokhmah. And as we can see in the world today, that all the info, all the wisdom in the world is good for nothing unless you have an understanding, i.e. binah. This is understanding. Like we said, you can show people what's going on in the world today. You can show them facts of what is actually truly happening in the world today and look them in the eye, be like, I don't know what you're talking about. The government is perfectly trustworthy. I totally believe this. And my kids too. That's what we're talking about. It's ridiculous. You either see or you don't. But they have knowledge, right? Not knowledge. They have wisdom because they have all this information. But without understanding, they will not get it. So, we have chokhmah, wonderful. But without binah, it's worth nothing. And this understanding is what God gives you. Understanding comes from God. This is the ability to make connections, right? To think for yourself and not just regurgitate a textbook or, in our case, recite verses by heart. Someone who can quote the Tanakh, does that mean that they're a genius? Maybe, but what are they going to do with it? Great. You tell me, I could open the book and I could see the same thing. What are you doing with that? How are you advancing this? What connections are you making? See what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying. But rather, it's where and how to apply that which you already possess. As David said in Psalms 111, verse 10, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, more like reverence of the Lord. And what is reverence of the Lord? We'll see that this is a cyclical pasuk. The reverence of the Lord. Good understanding to all who perform them, his praise endures forever. Okay? Reshit chokhmah, as in bereshit chokhmah. So it's not even the beginning, it's at first, meaning before there was anything. Bereshit. Right at the beginning. So we can see that wisdom and understanding are actually conditional in this verse. Before one can even hope to attain true wisdom, there must be reverence of the Lord, creator of heavens and the earth and everything therein. And before we can even hope to receive understanding, that which we have learned, i.e. wisdom, is to be performed, you see. And then his praise endures forever. How so? Because the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, meaning, how do you fear the Lord? How do you revere the Lord? By knowing God. You combine wisdom, chokhmah, with binah, understanding, you get dat. And then it continues to go over there. And you just keep getting fed. Deuteronomy 7:11. You shall therefore observe the commandments and the statutes and the ordinances, which I command you this day, la'asotam, to do them. The reason you are receiving this is so that you make it manifest. Israel is the chosen nation. Why? because God chose Israel to do this specific job. This is what you have been chosen for. Not based on our own merit, but based on the merit of our forefathers. They did the heavy lifting already. We just have to follow through on the track that they cleared for us. Understanding this, and I mean truly, as simple as it is, because most don't, is an absolute privilege. Most people have no idea these basic, simple concepts that I'm saying right now, that to you guys will be like, yeah, of course. And you see it, you make these connections. That's why more sparks are waking up all over the place. And even on the outside, like I said, when you get woken up, you see things that people who are Jews their whole lives don't even see. God woke you up. That means you got to do something with it. This wisdom, along with the understanding of what and how to do, is what gives us knowledge of God. And that is even the beginning of wisdom, which is the reverence of God. And when small children are educated in Torah, in Israel, in Jerusalem, there's nothing that pleases God more. And there's nothing that ascends to his throne quicker. When you are the age of mitzvah, 12 for a girl, 13 for a boy, you are like an angel. You have no sins. What do we read in the beginning? Every word of prayer that you say, every verse or chapter or even word that you learn is untainted with the sins of our lives. Even great tzaddikim, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. Okay, again, we acknowledge, okay? We're not them. We acknowledge that we sin every day, which is why we say vidui, we say confession every single night for God to forgive us for our sins, because it's almost impossible to go through a day without sinning. Again, if you have one negative thought, that is considered a sin, right? But God said at the end of the day, come clean, just in case you miss something, because you most likely did. If somebody cuts you off, you get angry for a second, you didn't do anything, just that fleeting second gotcha right there. Sin, okay? But it's not like sin, beating you over the head with it. You have to understand, it's about being constantly cleansed. You allowed that to enter your consciousness even for a moment. And when you go to sleep at night, you want to be clean because you're putting literally your neshama in God's mercy. We're not conscious in order to protect ourselves. So that's why we have to say prayers before. Your neshama goes up. If it's been a rough day for you, you don't know who's taking control of it. You don't know if it's really 100% you and strictly and purely you coming back to your body the next morning. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So we acknowledge this, and that's why it's very important. So every word that we say, doesn't matter how much Torah I study, I'm still carrying all the uncleanliness with me that I couldn't necessarily control. That's why tshuva. But a child, before they have this yoke put upon them, everything they say, all the prayers, angels, it's like angels. You cannot stop a child from learning Torah, even for building the temple, that which God chose to dwell in. That's that which we have been waiting for. You cannot stop a child from learning Torah or from praying. That's why when great rabbis fall ill, they gather small children to pray for them, because their merit is greater than any tzaddik of that generation. Nothing brings the Shekhinah quicker than the children of the house of God, toiling in Torah in the gates of Zion. That's today's class. Please stay tuned for next week when we actually speak about the temple. Here we go. Here's the house of God, literally the house that God chose. So thank you so much, as always, for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week and a Shabbat Shalom.